today we're going to discuss our fourth installment of the Govardhana Mellows, and so we'll review just a little bit. We'll have a brief recap of some of the things that we've discussed. I think that everyone who's here has heard most of what I had to say. So in our first meeting, we talked about Madhavendra Puri, and we talked about what a wonderful devotee he was and how he had traveled to Vrindavan, and he's there chanting, and he stayed at the Govinda Kund, and he bathed at Govinda Kund, and some of the ladies from Vrindavan, they saw him there and went back to Krishna's place and said, "There's some devotee staying there at the Govinda Kund. Maybe you should take him some milk." So Krishna went and took a pot of milk for Madhavendra Puri and asked, "So, who are you, and what kind of meditation are you doing?" And Madhavendra Puri replied, like, "Who are you, and what village do you come from?" And this, beautiful cowherd boy, Krishna, he said, "I'm a cowherd boy, and I live in this village, and I take care of anybody who doesn't take care of themselves, basically. In my village, nobody fasts, and some people have an ordinary course of working for some livelihood, and they feed themselves, and some people feed themselves by begging some alms from others. But if somebody doesn't do anything like that, then I make sure to take care of them." And then that cowherd boy, he said, "I'll return to get this pot from you after you've finished." And he never did. And Madhavendra Puri was left there a little stunned and looking for that boy. And then during that night, he had a beautiful dream where the deity of Gopal appeared to him and said, "I'm living in this bush. And years ago, when the Pujari fled from an attack from the attack from some Muslims, the Pujari hid me in this bush and then fled for his own life. And I've been living in this bush for a long time, and I'm suffering the heat and cold and the rain and the wind. And it would be wonderful if you get some other local people and come and find me." And so Madhavendra Puri woke from his dream and went into the village and inspired the villagers, and they went through the forest, and they found the Gopal deity and dug him out from under the bush where that same cowherd boy had guided Madhavendra Puri in the night. And then Madhavendra Puri installed the deity of Gopal on the top of Govardhana hill on a big stone. And for days and days, they celebrated the Anakut festival. And devotees from all over came day after day to see the deity of Gopal and to help in the bathing ceremony and offer all of what they had. They were offering all of their stock of grain and all their stock of rice, bringing milk products, and bathing the deity. And then in our next class, we discussed Lord Chaitanya and his travels through Vrindavan. And Lord Chaitanya he'd wanted to travel to Vrindavan for a long time, and there'd been he'd had some trouble getting there, but he finally took permission from I think Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya and Ramananda Roy while he was there in Jagannath Puri, and they requested him to take a few people with him. They asked him not to go alone, and Sanatana Goswami, of course, had encouraged him not to go with a big crowd, And so Lord Chaitanya, he went with Balabhadra Bhattacharya and another unnamed person. And then they traveled through the Jarikanda forest, and they spent their days and nights basically camping. And Lord Chaitanya was chanting all the time and enjoying warming himself by the fire at night and bathing in the rivers, bathing in the waterfalls, and they were chanting. And then as they arrived in the Vrindavan area, they met one of the disciples of Madhavendra Puri in a little community called Sannodia, and that devotee remains also unnamed, and so we refer to him as the Sannodia Brahman. And he was one of the Brajbasis, one of the residents of the Dham, and so I like to imagine that he was sort of the Lord Chaitanya's tour guide. So then they became four, and they traveled to the different places in the Braj. And Lord Chaitanya went, and he also bathed at the Govinda Kund, just like Madhavendra Puri had done. And then he went to the Govardhana hill, and then while he was there, he stayed in a little place called Ganthuli Gram. And in Ganthuli Gram, the Gopal deity arranged for the pujari to bring him down from the top of the hill, because Lord Chaitanya was feeling full of reverence for Govardhana hill. And so he didn't want to walk on the hill. And so the Gopal deity arranged for him to come down so that Lord Chaitanya and those his associates could take darshan from the Gopal deity. And then in our last meeting, we talked about the glories of Raghunath Das. And we talked about how Raghunath Das had, he was born as the son of Govardhan Majumdar, which I think is sort of like a zamindar or a big landholder. And so he grew up in a wealthy family. And then when he became an adult, he was married to a beautiful woman, and he had a really nice opulent life, but he wasn't attracted to that opulent life, and he wanted to run away and be with Lord Chaitanya. And so Govardhan and Raghunath Das' mother, they tried very hard to keep him at home. But Raghunath Das, he kept leaving home, and he would sneak off in the night, and they would send different people to basically capture him and force him to come home. And then eventually he kept running away. And his father Govardhan said that there's no reason for us to keep trying to keep him here against his will. He feels compelled by something very deep. He's very moved by Lord Chaitanya and his Sankirtan mission and the bhakti mission that Lord Chaitanya is on. And Raghunath, there's no reason for us to try and keep Raghunath Das home. He's too compelled. He's gonna leave home. And so eventually Raghunath Das escaped, so to speak, and went to meet Lord Chaitanya. And when he arrived in Jagannath Puri, he'd traveled for 12 days, and he was a little thin and a little dirty from traveling through the forest and traveling on the roads and the paths. And so he was met there by Lord Chaitanya and Svarup Damodar and some of Lord Chaitanya's other associates. And Lord Chaitanya encouraged him to go and bathe in the sea, and then to see the deity of Lord Jagannath at the temple. And then Lord Chaitanya placed Raghunath Das in the care of Svarup Damodar. And Lord Chaitanya was naturally very pleased to have Raghunath Das there. And he said, now we have 3 Raghunaths in our company. We have Raghunath Bhatta, who's one of the other famous 6 Goswamis. And then we have Raghunath Vaidya, and now there's Raghunath Das, and we placed him in the care of Svarup Damodar. And so he's known as the Raghunath of Svarup era Raghu. Just like today, we have so many different devotees with similar names. We have, so many Krishna Das and so many Radharani Dasis and Prabhupada Das. And so the tradition sort of continues. And so Lord Chaitanya, Raghunath Das wanted to receive some instruction from Lord Chaitanya. And Lord Chaitanya said, I've placed you in the charge of someone who's very qualified. Svarup Damodar Goswami is very qualified. He knows more than me. I'm learning from Svarup Damodar myself. And so don't think that I've tried to shortchange you, or I'm not giving you a wonderful situation. I'm giving you the best that I can. And so, but Raghunath Das persisted. He's a persistent guy. You can see in his character the way he was running away from home, and persistent in asking for Lord Chaitanya's blessing and association. And so Lord Chaitanya said, but if you'd like to have some instruction from me, then what I have to tell you is, don't hear about the village talk. Don't hear of the Brahma Katha, and don't talk like the normal. Don't talk like an ordinary person, and don't spread gossip, and don't hear too much about the rumors and the news, and don't eat fancy food, and don't wear fancy clothes. And he gave him one further instruction. Trinadapi Sunichena, Tarorapi Sahisnuna, Amanina, Amanadena, Kirtaniya Sadahari. So we know that, of course, is the third verse from the Lord Chaitanya Shikshastakam prayers. He said, you should be more humble than a blade of grass, and be more tolerant than a tree, and be ready to offer all respect to others, and don't expect honor for oneself. And in such a state of mind, you can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. And I think he also said somewhere in the course of all that you should worship Radha and Krishna within your mind. So we talked just a little bit about that. We talked about the Antaranga Seva, which is Antaranga Seva means like a very deep meditation. This is where basically you have an internal life, a meditative life, and we hear about some devotees like Lord Chaitanya himself entering into this Antaranga Seva, this internal meditative life. So I think that something like that, we may get a glimpse of that in our sadhana, in our sadhaka life, in our future. I think it happens at the point of I can't think of the term now. So let me go through them and we'll see if we can arrive at it. So our devotional life begins with Shraddha. We have some faith in the Lord. We have some faith in the transcendence, and we have some faith that that's where our happiness will come from. And so from there, we get the association. We get the company of sadhus and other sadhakas and people who are like-minded, and those sadhus give us direction, and those other sadhakas, they also give us some direction, and they become our companions and friends in the course of pursuing our devotional life. And that sadhu, he or she, of course, gives us some daily practices, and gives us direction, and gives us knowledge, gives us sambandha gyan, or the foundational knowledge about what is the nature of transcendence. So we have sadhus and sadhakas, and that sadhu will give us some daily practices, which becomes our bhajana kriya. So that's the path of worship, the path of bhajan, and that and our path of bhajan, of course, includes 9 different practices of devotional service, beginning with hearing, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Sakyam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atmanivedanam. And so we, as often as possible, we take advantage of all these opportunities to hear. And we hear about Sambandha Gyan, the foundational knowledge of what is our own nature and what is the nature of the Lord, what is the nature of the world, how and why does the Lord appear, and then we hear about the Abhideya Tattva. What are the practices of devotional service in both a regulated way and in a spontaneous way? And then that bhajana kriya is of 2 types, and there are those types are blended, and it's a gray area, and I used to sort of think that they were like 2 different stages, the stage of bhajana kriya and the stage of nishta, which of course is the next stage. Nishta means very firmly fixed. I think, like, when I think of fixed, I often think of Shakespeare's Macbeth. I think that, and I've not read it, but I saw it as a play once, and it's sort of a famous quote. I think that the king is supposed to do some dastardly thing, and he doesn't really want to do it. And I think that Lady Macbeth says, "Screw your courage to the sticking place," if I'm not mistaken. And I sometimes think of that when I think about nishta. Of course, we're not up to any any dastardly thing, but that's the nature of being very fixed. I guess Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, of immovable things, I am the Himalayas. So nishta means very fixed. So after practicing this bhajana kriya in an unfixed way for a long time, seems like for me a long time, and as Padmanabha Swami has pointed out, that many devotees feel themselves to be in the stage of anishta bhajana kriya, yet unfixed bhajana kriya. And so our practice goes up and down. We're troubled by a variety of things. Sometimes we're hot, and we're practicing our devotional service, and we chant every day in a very regulated way, and we're very excited about devotional service, and we apply ourselves very diligently, whether it's easier or whether it's hard. And then sometimes we're cold, and we get distracted by other things that go on in our life, or some other interests or something, and so we pursue those things, and we dedicate a lot of time to them. But then, so anishta and nishta is sort of a sliding scale, and we sort of vacillate between the two, but bhajana kriya and nishta go hand in hand. So by doing our bhajana kriya in an unfixed way, we become purified, our hearts become purified, our interests become solidified, and then we sort of gradually move into the stage of being more and more fixed. So I like to think that the process is very generous, and that as Guru Maharaj often points out, that bhakti is not something that we're doing. Bhakti is something that is doing us, and that bhakti is not something that's on our agenda every day, that bhakti has us on her agenda. And so we're getting a lot of mercy from from our practice, even in an unfixed way. I think that for myself, I know that I have made some progress in spite of doing bhajana kriya in an unfixed way. I practice bhakti in a very unsteady way a lot of times, but I do try to chant every day. But to be quite honest, I sometimes chant a varying number of rounds on different days. I don't hear every day, but that's one of the easiest things to do, is to hear Guru Maharaj lectures. That's one of the main things that I've done. Even if I didn't chant at all, I would try to listen to Guru Maharaj's lectures, and he's encouraged us in that way. If you can't practice, if you can't chant, or you can't read, or you can't do your gayatris or whatever, then at least try to hear the lectures. And there are so many good lectures, and those lectures, they give us Sambandha Gyan, and they give us Abhideya Gyan, and they give us Prayojan Gyan. So we have knowledge of the practices, we have knowledge, foundational knowledge, and we have knowledge of the perfectional stage. And Guru Maharaj, of course, lately he's talking so much about our highest prospect of being in a particular mellow of love with Krishna. Anyway, so we try to take advantage of all these processes of hearing and associating with our Guru Maharaj. So we also, by hearing, we get sadhu sangha, we get the association of a sadhu. So that's such a powerful thing, that sadhu sangha is the hub on which the wheel of our bhakti goes forward. So that's so many benefits are there from hearing Guru Maharaj's lectures and taking advantage of what's happening here on top of Vivek. And so we reach Nishta, and then after Nishta, which of course Guru Maharaj has emphasized as the interim goal, something that we should strive for. And it's sort of like a constant pouring of devotional service into our hearts and minds. We're constantly engaged there, and we hear about that kind of thing. We're constantly hearing, we're constantly chanting, we're constantly remembering, we're serving. And it's kind of I think maybe Sridhar Maharaj talked about it like a constant flow of oil, constantly pouring oil. But that's what it means to Nishta. Means we're perpetually doing it. And then from Nishta, we go into the stage of Ruchi. And then so Ruchi means now we have a real taste. And I think that real taste, sometimes we get a glimpse of that real taste when we're in a festival days where we're surrounded by devotees. Our Guru Maharaj is there, and there's so many components that give us a glimpse, that give us a taste of devotional service. And then from Ruchi, we get to Asakti. And Asakti is where we might enter into this Antaranga Seva. I think that in the stage of Asakti, it means we have a particular kind of attachment. So both Ruchi means like a deep taste, and Guru Maharaj describes that deep taste as like what was our medicine, the taste of chanting Hare Krishna. It was a medicine. Now it's become our food. I think there's a description in Rupa Goswami's Nectar of Instruction that talks about for the person afflicted by the disease of avidya, or ignorance, the sweet taste of Krishna's holy names is unavailable, or it tastes bitter, the jaundice of avidya. But that jaundice of avidya, or ignorance, is cured by the sugar candy of Krishna's holy names, just like jaundice is cured by eating sugar candy or rock candy. So we go on tasting these holy names, and and sometimes, and now in the stage of anishta, that sometimes tastes bitter, sometimes it tastes a little sweet, but when we reach that stage of ruchi, then it becomes very sweet, and that thing that was medicine has now become our food, and so now we're living on that. We're living on hearing and chanting, and associating with devotees. That becomes our real sustenance, and we can hardly wait for it. So we have, that's ruchi, and then once that ruchi is refined a little more, then we reach a stage of attachment. We become attached to a very particular form of Krishna. Maybe our sentiment becomes a little refined, and we understand, maybe we have a strong inclination, or we have a desire to serve Krishna in a particular way. And of course, our two windows of opportunity have been emphasized lately. There's been some emphasis given to the idea of Manjari Baba as one of the windows of opportunity offered by Lord Chaitanya, to enter into that mood of Radha Dasyam, becoming the servant of Srimati Radharani. And then we have the mood of Sakyaras, that's given by Lord Nityananda, who is the incarnation or the embodiment of friendliness towards Krishna, the embodiment of what it means to be a cowherd boy, or to be a Brajbasi. So in the stage of Asakti, all of those sentiments will become more clear to us. And in that stage of Asakti, our desire to serve Krishna in one of his particular forms and one of our particular forms, our topmost potential, is we become very fixed in that, and then we may even glimpse our own selves. We may get a glimpse of Krishna, and we may get a glimpse of our own selves in the realm of our highest prospect, in that ultimate transcendental reality. That we may get a glimpse of that in the stage of Asakti. And in that, so that Asakti, all of that is a roundabout way of getting around to this Antaranga Seva, which Raghunath Das was doing there with Svarup Damodar. And when Lord Chaitanya gave him that instruction about serving within his mind, serving Radha and Krishna, that's that Antaranga Seva that might get glimpsed at the stage of Asakti. And then after Asakti, there's Bhava. And of course, Bhava has two primary characteristics. It's very rarely attained. So Krishna says, out of many millions of men who strive to understand me, hardly one knows me in truth. So that, in one sense, he might be talking about that person who's attained Bhava, that person it's like a ray of the sun of prema has entered that devotee's heart, and a person graduates from being a sadhaka to being a bhavika. So in that bhava, then one may really get a lot of glimpse and taste of what it means to serve Krishna in that internal life. And then, of course, once that, the other quality of bhava is that it's moksha laguta krit. So moksha, of course, is liberation. We become liberated from the earthly realm, where we think that that happiness comes from connecting the sense objects with the senses, and but we think that happiness comes from acquisition. So that we get free from all that ideas of liberation. We also get free of the idea that I want to be free from suffering. That's liberation also, the idea that I'd like to be free from suffering, free from anxiety. And so Moksha laguta krit means that's one of the qualities of bhava, that it makes light of liberation, makes liberation seem like a small thing. And then, of course, there's prema, which is our prayojan tattva, the truth about the ultimate goal of life is the prayojan tattva, and that's prema. And so, all of these devotees that have a role in this Govardhana Lila, all of these devotees have the stage of prema, whether they're sadhana siddhas who've reached prema by the course of sadhana, or whether they're Nitya Lila devotees whose rag is inborn, who are always eternally made of these feelings of love for Krishna, whose hearts are eternally filled with these sentiments of love for Krishna. So anyway, I wanted to dive back into the Govardhana Lila a little bit. I've digressed and talked about devotional service quite a bit, and but you can't talk about the Govardhana Lila without talking about devotional service. So I wanted to share just a few things. Let's see here. Krishna Chaitanya shared some stuff with me some time ago about Govardhana, and I wanted to share some of those details. So let's see. So I'll read a little bit. And this, what he shared with me, is the Kartik handbook from Sri Bhakti Vallabhatirtha Goswami, who I believe is one of the grand disciples of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada. And he was part of the Sri Chaitanya Gaudiya Math. And so he's written this book, and it's a sort of a guide to practice during the month of Kartik. And then here there's a section on Giriraj Govardhan. And so I'll read just a little bit. Let's see here. So a lot of these stories, obviously there are descriptions in Srimad Bhagavatam and the 10th canto, and the descriptions in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. There's another book that I'm not familiar with, the Ananda Vrindavan Champu, and there's which has a lot of descriptions, and also the Garga Samhita. So the appearance of Sri Govardhan in this world and how he acquired the name of Giriraj is described in the Garga Samhita of Sri Gargacharya in the conversation between Nanda Maharaj and his senior advisor, the Gopa Sananda. So I have a strong feeling that this person Sananda is one of Nanda Maharaj's brothers, Upananda, Sananda. There were 5 of them, the Nandas. So Sananda spoke to Nanda Maharaj, giving reference to the conversation between Pandu and Bhishma. So when Lord Krishna had been requested to appear in the world by Bhumi Devi, who appeared in the form of a cow and asked for Krishna to appear in the world to relieve the burden of all kind of demoniac leaders and demoniac kings, and lift the burden of dishonesty and irreligion. Lord Krishna was thinking to himself that he would come to the earth, and so he was talking with Radharani and requested that Radharani also appear on the earth, and that Radharani expressed her unwillingness to go to a place where Vrindavan, the Jamuna River, and Sri Govardhan were not present. Sri Krishna then sent his own transcendental spiritual realm of Rajadam, which is an area of 84 krosha, which is a new term for me, or 252 kilometers. to descend to India in this world. I like the way this is expressed. Vrajadam is not a part of the material world consisting of earth, water, fire, air, and sky. The sky is also, heard it from Prabhupada, he used the term ether. And so the Vrajadam is not like that. Govardhana appeared, so Radharani said that I don't want to go anywhere where the Jamuna doesn't flow and where there's not Govardhan Hill. And so can't help but think that, sometimes the Lord sends people to different parts of the world to assist the people who live in that area. So when Govardhan appeared in the world, he didn't appear in Vraja. And then you think about some other devotees also, like who didn't appear close by, who didn't appear in Vrindavan, or they didn't appear in Navadvip. Advaita Acharya and Srivas Thakur and Haridas. Haridas didn't appear in Navadvip. Lord Nityananda didn't appear in Navadvip. They came from other places, and they purified those places where they came from. Who else? Tapan Mishra. He was from there, but Lord Chaitanya sent Tapan Mishra somewhere else because Lord Chaitanya knew that he would be there in the future. And so Lord Chaitanya wanted some devotees to stay with. And so he sent Tapan Mishra far away where he would basically live there without the association of other devotees. But Lord Chaitanya sent him there with a purpose. And so Lord Chaitanya, of course, is sending Govardhan to the material realm, or sending him to the spiritual realm within the material realm. So Govardhan appeared as the son of Mount Drona in Salmali Island in Western India. So I never heard that, the Salmali Island. And all the demigods were excitedly delighted at the appearance of Govardhan and showered down flowers. All the big mountains, such as the Himalayas and Sumeru, were happy to hear about Govardhan's appearance, and they came to pay their homage to Govardhan and to worship him. And in their prayers they said, since Govardhan is the holy place of pastimes of the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna, in the transcendental sweet realm of Goloka, he is the king of all mountains and the crown of Goloka. He is like an umbrella for Para Brahman Krishna, and Vrindavan is within his lap. And since then, Govardhan has been renowned as Giriraj. So he received the name Giriraj from the Himalayas and Mount Meru. And so, of course, there's a famous story of how Govardhan had appeared there. And I think the most common story is the story of Pulastya Muni, who is one of the 7 mind-born sons of Brahma, known as the Manasaputra, the sons of Lord Brahma's mind. And so Pulastya Muni was traveling on pilgrimage and came to Salmali Island, and there he was astonished and charmed to see the extraordinary beauty of Govardhan, and who was adorned with a variety of fruit and flower trees, pleasant sitting places, springs, soft grass, etc. And when Pulastya Muni approached Drona, so Pulastya Muni said to Drona, I live in Kashi, which has special significance due to the presence of the Ganges and Visveshvar Mahadev. Kashi is, I think, a city that's more associated with Lord Shiva Mahadev. Sinners go there to get salvation, but my desire is to perform penance there after installing Govardhan. So in that way, Pulastya Muni asked Drona for his son, and Drona knew that sometimes these sages are a little rough around the edges. They may become angry due to their austerities, they may become just a little hard, hard-nosed, rough around the edges, and so Drona didn't want to be cursed by Pulastya Muni. So so he encouraged Govardhana to go with Pulastya Muni, and so of course Pulastya Muni, Govardhana said that I'll go with you on one condition, that if you put me down somewhere for any reason, then that's where I'll stay. And so he jumped up onto the hand of Pulastya Muni, who carried him from this Salmali island back to, I guess he was heading for Kashi. And then, but when he was traveling in the land of Braja, in some stories it said he felt compelled to stop and answer the call of nature. But in this particular pastime, it said that Govardhana made himself very heavy, like Krishna became very heavy when he was holding on to the neck of Trinavarta, the whirlwind demon. He became very heavy, and I think it's one of the perfectional mystic cities. You can become lighter than the lightest and travel on the rays of the sunshine, or you can become heavier than the heaviest. So that's what Govardhana did. He became very heavy, and Pulastya Muni, he sat him down there in the Braj. And of course, Pulastya Muni didn't like that. He said, "Come on, get back on my hand." And Govardhana said, "No, I'm not going any further. We had a deal. Those were the terms of my agreement. I said, if you put me down, I was going to stay." And Pulastya Muni, sure enough, he became a little angry and he cursed Govardhana. He said, "You're so big, you're so tall." In one of the descriptions, he was so tall that the horses that belong to Surya, the sun god, the horses that pull the chariot of the sun across the sky, would graze on the grasses on the top of Govardhana. He said, "You're so tall, and but I curse you that every day you'll shrink by the size of a sesame seed," in this particular version. And so that's how Govardhana came to be in the Braja. And so I'll give you another story as well that may not be quite as prominent. There are a few different stories. They're nice. A second popular version of how Giriraj came to Braja seems to have first appeared in Narayan Bhatta Goswami's book, the Braj Bhakti Vilas. And therein it says, in the Treta Yuga, when the monkeys were helping Lord Ramachandra construct a bridge to Lanka, Hanuman went to the Himalayas and picked up the Giriraj and was intending to bring him to help build the bridge. So all of you have probably heard the story. Lord Ramachandra, his wife Sita had been stolen and kidnapped. And so he was going to build a bridge from India to Lanka, Sri Lanka as it's now known, the island off the southeast coast of India. And so Hanuman and the army of monkeys and bears, they're throwing stones into the water, and they're writing the name of Lord Ram on every stone, and the stones were floating. And Hanuman told the spider who was carrying a little pebble, he said, "Get out of the way. I'm carrying a big boulder. You should get out of the way and let me through." And Lord Ramachandra, he said, everybody is doing their service according to their size and ability. And the spider carrying this little pebble, you're not different or better because you're carrying a big boulder. So Lord Ramachandra is appreciating everyone's service. So anyway, while they're building this bridge, Hanuman went to the Himalayas or to the Salmali Islands, and he picked up Govardhana hill. And then as he's making a giant leap like Hanuman does, he heard a tremendous voice from the sky, a voice from heaven. And it said the bridge to Lanka is complete. And so Hanuman set the Govardhana hill down there in the Braja, and Govardhana was disappointed. He thought, oh, this is going to be wonderful. I was going to be floating in the ocean, and Lord Ramachandra and Lakshman and the whole army they were going to walk on me. They're going to step on me. And I was going to feel their lotus feet as they crossed to rescue Sita. And so he got a blessing from Hanuman that in another age, if you'll stay here in the Braja, then Lord Ramachandra will appear as Krishna, and then you'll get to feel his lotus feet at that time. There's another interesting story, one that's even less well known, maybe. According to the Padma Purana, a Brahmin had received Sarupya Mukti. And Sarupya is one of the 5 sas, the 5 types of liberation: Salokya, Sarupya, Samipya, Sharsti, and the one that devotees find particularly disinteresting, Sayuja. And Sayuja means to merge with the Lord, and we're not interested in Sayuja. The other different types of liberation, they may be concomitant with devotional service, and so we may accept those in the terms of performing our devotional service. We might have a form that's similar to the Lord's, or we may live on the same planet as the Lord, or we may have the same opulences as the Lord, but we're not interested in those things independent of being Krishna's servant. And we're not interested in Sayuja, in the idea of merging with the impersonal Brahma Jyoti. That doesn't appeal to us. We don't want to be by ourselves forever. Sometimes I like to think of it as a pure heart and nothing to do. Guru Maharaj has a lecture, a clean heart and something to do. I sometimes like to think of it as nothing to do and no one to do it with forever. So that doesn't, Sayuja Mukti, it doesn't appeal to us at all. So anyway, this Brahmin, so I'll just read it. I'm not going to be able to state it clearly. According to Padma Purana, a Brahmin received Sarupya Mukti as the spiritual form of Krishna's manifestation as Govardhana hill. And I guess when so somehow there was a Brahmin who maybe he met Krishna somehow, and this Brahmin had been performing austerities, and so maybe he was thin, and so the Lord arranged for this Brahmin to appear as Govardhana, and because he was both hungry and thirsty, the Lord arranged for him to be fed by this Anukut festival, where there were so many mounds of rice and lakes of sweet rice and lakes of nectar, and basically hills of sweets. And the Govardhana hill was eating and eating. And so all of that is in response to having met the Lord earlier when he was performing austerities and being thin and hungry and thirsty. And so of course he was fed by this Anukut festival, and he was also in his mountain form, he was going to drink fresh water from the rain clouds. So these Samvartaka clouds were nourishing and life-giving to Govardhana. Let's see. Let's see if I got anything else. I'm a little less organized this week. All right, so I've talked for a while now. If anyone has any questions or comments, now is probably a good time for you guys to jump in. And if not, it's been a pleasure talking with all of you. It's been a great boon for me to have to delve into these things and hone my focus a little bit on the Govardhana Leela and think about devotional service in terms of a little deeper study and a little presentation on Govardhana. There's a message in the chat from Vrajahari Pranam. It disappeared. Oh, let's see here. Thank you for the Hari Katha. Sri Chaitanya instructed.
Kanuram?
Yes.
Sorry. Martin is translating it, but you can't hear it probably because you're not in English.
Yeah, let me turn my English. Okay, and mute. Okay. Yes, thank you, Martin. Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, and maybe Kanuram, you can repeat the question also, so the devotee that listen the recording can hear it.
Okay, I can do that. Okay. Thank you, Martin. I'm not Rajahari Prabhu, I'm not exactly sure how to answer your question. I'm not necessarily familiar with Lord Nityananda's instructions to Raghunath Das about preaching in regard to conversations about Jaga and Madai. The first thing that comes to mind, though, is like Sanatana Goswami. And Sanatana Goswami, it's in that beautiful Astakam. It said that Sanatan, Rupa and Sanatan were good friends to everybody that lived in the area, and that Sanatana Goswami was like a leader. They were charming to both the gentle and the ruffians, and that they would help all kinds of people, not just the devotees, but other people that lived in the area. They would come to Sanatana Goswami if they had a disagreement, and they would present their different sides. As people would say, that they were disagreeing, and Sanatana Goswami would help them iron out their situation, and he would talk to them about some practical matters as well as devotional matters. And I was always inspired by that. So in that sense, I think that devotees are somewhat like that. That they hear about practical things as well. So I just don't think it's practical to think I'm only going to talk about devotional things, and I'm not going to, like, even when I associate with devotees, for instance, we aspire to associate with devotees. When we spend time with devotees, we want that time to be spent well, and we want to spend our sadhu sangha time talking about things which are sat. We want to talk about things of an eternal nature, but we talk about things that are practical in our daily life, and we find out about how things are going in somebody's family life. We see our friends. How's it going with your kids in school? And is your wife doing okay? Or how's your husband? And we say, how are things at work? You're doing okay. Rupa Goswami, he advises us about 6 confidential exchanges of love between devotees, not confidential, but the 6 exchanges of love with devotees. And he encourages us to reveal our minds in confidence and to inquire confidentially. And so we see that Lord Chaitanya does the same thing. He talks with people about their life, about some practical things. He finds out about what's going on in people's lives, and he also spends a lot of time talking about transcendental topics, about the nature of bhakti and the nature of devotional service. So does that help? I'm not sure I'm getting to the essence of your question. Okay. Thank you, Vrajahari. I hope that helps. So I can't go back up. I think that Govinda Mohini had something also. What does that one say? Okay, so yeah, so Lord Chaitanya, seems like that Lord Chaitanya had great reverence for Govardhana Hill, and I think that Lord Chaitanya, sometimes there are different personalities, and Govardhana is a really prominent one, who is both an individual as Govardhana, and he's also Krishna. So when in the Krishna Lila, when Krishna was there with Nanda Maharaj and Mother Yashoda and all the cowherd boys, and he lifted Govardhana Hill, or before he lifted Govardhana Hill, he convinced Nanda Maharaj to worship Govardhana Hill by his karma mimamsa. He convinced him to worship Govardhana Hill rather than to worship Indra. And so he was worshiping Govardhana Hill, and at the same time he appeared as Govardhana Hill, and he's eating all the offerings. He's eating these big hills of rice and drinking the lakes of nectar, and appearing. Krishna appears as the hill. So I can't think of there's one example I can think of that I heard from Indrajumna Maharaj years ago. There's a few examples where Krishna goes and he appears within the form of another person. And so, like, there's one example where this person had gone in, he didn't like a word in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and so I think he scratched that word out. And then later Krishna went and he made a correction in that person's Bhagavatam. And then that person, he came home and he was about to sit down and have lunch. He asked his wife, "So where's lunch?" And she's like, "You were already here. You already ate lunch. You worked on your book a little bit, and then you went again." But actually, that was Krishna appearing as that person and making that correction. And there's a story where there was a king, and he was going to ride into battle of this Rajasthani king. This is the Indrajumna Maharaj story. And he went out, and he was on his horse, and he went out, and he had two swords, and he was going out, and he was devastating the other army. He was splitting the soldiers in half with one sword, and splitting the horses in half with another sword. And then he had no recollection of it. And so it was as if Krishna had appeared as that person. So these are just a couple of aside stories to illustrate how Krishna may completely empower a person, or may enter the form of another person. So it's sort of like that with Govardhana. So Lord Chaitanya didn't want to put his feet on Krishna. We don't want to walk on Krishna. We don't even want to walk on Krishna's footsteps in Vrindavan. So he didn't want to step on Krishna. But Madhavendra Puri, of course, was different, because the Gopal deity had encouraged him to walk up to the top of Govardhana and install the Gopal deity on the top of Govardhana hill. But from what I understand, we follow in the mood of Lord Chaitanya, and we don't walk on the hill. Does that help? I have a few, of course, I feel a little tangential in my answer. Thank you for your question. I appreciate that. Yeah, I can read that one. So Matthew says, "Thank you for your wonderful series. Can you please elaborate on what you mean when you refer to Manjari Bhava and Sakya Bhava as two particular windows of opportunity?" So this is something that Guru Maharaj has been giving some emphasis to lately. And of course, it goes back in our bhakti tradition for a long time. But there are different devotees have different aspirations for what they think or that they would like to be in the ultimate realm, like we were talking about our prayojan tattva. The prayojan is the ultimate goal. So our ultimate goal is that we want to serve and live. We want to serve Krishna in Vrindavan, in the village of Vrindavan, and we want to live and serve in Lord Chaitanya's pastimes in the Nitya Navadweep. We want to live and serve in those two leelas. That's our ultimate aspiration as devotees, is to purify our hearts of all the worldly conditioning, and we want to fill our hearts with devotional sentiments and sentiments of surrender, and offering our whole selves to our Guru, offering ourselves to the service of the Vaishnavas, and offering ourselves in the service of Krishna and his holy Dham and the holy people that reside in that Dham. But there are certain moods that we're able to have. There are primary relationships that go on in those places. And those relationships are primarily four. There's a Dasyaras, which is the feeling of being Krishna's servant. And then there's Sakyaras, which is the feeling of being Krishna's friend. And then there's parental love, where one would be older than Krishna and feel superior to Krishna, like Nanda Maharaj and Mother Yashoda. And then there's the Madhurya Bhav, the sweetness Bhav, the feeling of romantic love for Krishna. But there are two primary windows of opportunity, and a window of opportunity is a chance to become to have those feelings that the devotees there feel. So we ultimately want to become, we are Raganuga devotees. So anuga means to follow the path of rag, and that rag means like an inborn feeling. So we follow in the footsteps of devotees who have these profound feelings. We become followers of their feeling, and we become their literal followers. We take their advice and we hear from them, and we aspire to become like them. By association, we catch these feelings. It's a modern term. You catch feelings for somebody. So we catch these feelings of love from different sadhus who impact our lives. And the two primary feelings that are available to us as followers of Lord Chaitanya are this Sakya Bhav, which is the feeling of friendliness. So Sakya is there are different types of friendly relationships with Krishna. There are four primary feelings of Sakya Bhav, where Sakya is mixed with Dasya. So like the younger boys in Vrindavan, they serve Krishna, and their feeling of service is imbued with friendliness. And then there's the Priya Sakas, which are they purely have confidence with Krishna, that they feel like Krishna is mine and I am Krishna's, and we're on the same level. And sometimes when the cowherd boys play games with Krishna, sometimes they might wrestle Krishna to the ground, and then sometimes on the other side they might get wrestled to the ground by Krishna. And so sometimes Krishna wins in the game and you have to carry Krishna on your shoulders, and then other times your team may win and Krishna may have to carry you on his shoulders. So that there's a feeling of confidence, and mamata is a feeling of minus. Krishna is like me. And then there are the older boys. This is the fourth of those types of feelings of Sakya, where the older boys, the bigger boys, maybe they feel like they're protecting Krishna. Like Lord Balaram is an example whose his feelings of friendliness of Krishna, or feelings of friendliness with Krishna, are bundled with sentiments of dasya. So sometimes he's serving Krishna, and it's bundled together with a feeling of parental affection, or like that they're superior to Krishna. And that, like, for those boys, that feeling of friendliness is they appear separately, because the feelings of dasya, it works well with Sakya, friendly ras, but the feelings of parental affection, they don't necessarily go as well with the feelings of friendliness. So they appear at different times. So maybe Lord Balaram says he gets those feelings. He's empowered by Mother Yashoda with some of her parental affection. He says, I know that you want to go to the Kaliya lake today, but we're not going to Kaliya lake. Not today. We're not going to Kaliya. So maybe I'm giving a long explanation, but that Sakya Bhav appears in the modern world through the channel of Lord Nityananda. So that's one of our windows of opportunity. So I asked Guru Maharaj about this Manjari Bhav last week on last Sunday's call. Maybe it was 2 Sundays ago. But anyway, that Manjari Bhav is the feeling that the younger girls in Vrindavan have, and they are Manjaris. And the example of those personalities is like Rupa and Sanatan. They appear in the world as sadhakas, right? So Rupa and Sanatan Goswami are sadhakas, and we follow in their footsteps. And they show how to approach Lord Krishna's pastimes, and they show how to approach Lord Chaitanya by their example. Not everybody is like an example of how to be. Like Pundarik Vidyanidhi is like a person who has profound devotion for the Lord, but we can't necessarily follow in his footsteps. He's very wealthy and he doesn't necessarily follow the track of sadhana. But he's nonetheless a perfected person. We hope to, we would love for some of his feelings to rub off on us, but this Manjari Bhava is something that is a feeling that's naturally there eternally in people like Rupa and Sanatan. They are Manjaris, and those Manjaris are the servants of Srimati Radharani. And they don't have any desire to have a romantic connection with Lord Krishna. They're prominently connected with Srimati Radharani, and so that window of opportunity, we talked about that in this series when Lord Chaitanya was running toward the Chataka Parvata, which is a sand dune in Jagannath Puri. He was in his own antaranga seva, in his own internal meditative life. He left his external consciousness and went into his deep internal life. And in that way, in that deep internal realm, he was seeing the pastimes of Radha and Krishna in his internal life. And he's engaged by some gopikas to pick some flowers for the divine couple, Radha and Krishna, who'd gone into one of the caves at Govardhana. And Guru Maharaj said that in that stage, or in that phase of his life, Lord Chaitanya was tasting that Manjari Bhava. So that's those are the two primary opportunities that modern followers of Lord Chaitanya have. And sometimes we see like an exception. Somebody maybe naturally is inclined for whatever reason to enter maybe Vatsalya Ras, and they're still part of our group. And the primary example that I can think of is like Vamsi Das Babaji. And Vamsi Das Babaji was one of the not colleagues but contemporaries of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, Srila Prabhupada. And he was an avadut, and he was a Babaji, but his feelings of Krishna were parental. And so he would talk with the deities and cook for the deities and worship his deities every day, but he would spend time talking and exchanging with the deities, and he would educate Krishna and give him some lessons about, I don't know, grammar or school lessons or something like that. And he would punish Krishna, he'd get angry with Krishna. So that would be Vatsalya Bhava, but that's not one of the primary windows of opportunity in our particular lineage. Does that help?
Yes, thank you very much. I'm hearing these concepts. I can't hear you.
Wait.
Oh. Can you hear me?
Are you on English channel?
Yes, I got it now.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. I've been hearing the concepts and I've listened to all the classes, and but that was an incredibly helpful structure within which to understand these concepts. So I appreciate that.
Okay, I'm glad I could help. Where are you, Matthew?
I'm in New Jersey.
Okay, cool. Nice to meet you. I
Nice
never
to
met
meet
you
you.
before. I'm here in North Carolina in the States.
Great.
Thank you for your question. Okay, so thank all of you very much. It's been a pleasure talking with all of you, and thank you for all your patience, and thank you for giving me your association. And Sri Sadhu Sangha Ki Jai, Sri Govardhana Hill Ki Jai, Sri Guru Maharaj Ki Jai, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Ki Jai. And so tomorrow Guru Maharaj will be on, and so hopefully we get to take advantage of his association. And we've got more, I think, very soon. I think let's see, Tattva Vivek has a whole new schedule coming up for December. So we'll have some of the same folks and some new folks as well. So thank all of you very much. I hope you have a wonderful day. Hare Krishna.
Shriman Kanuram Das Prabhu Ki Jai.
Jai.